Hey, how's it going, everyone? It's Ben Falcon's Media Corner back again with a brand new video for today. Welcome back to another movie review, aka for a Saw review video for today, in which for this is actually going to be a double AKF for a Saw review video for today, in which for this double AKF for a Saw review video for today, this is going to be my review on two films that were released last year by Universal, in which one of them is a dystopian action horror film and the other is a psychological thriller. So we're going to kick off with the first one, which is a dystopian action horror film, and that movie is The Forever Purge. Now, The Forever Purge, this is the fifth entry to the Purge franchise, in which this series was created back in 2013. And so, in this movie, we see the United States of America is plunged into chaos and confusion, where we see some group of people decide to make a purge that lasts forever, which lasts for days and even weeks. And so in this movie we see a group of people who are trying to survive this whole Forever Purge situation, in which they're trying to basically escape America, and hopefully they can survive this whole chaos and confusion that's going on throughout this whole movie. So that's pretty much the story of The Forever Purge. Now, when it comes to the whole Purge franchise itself, like the original 4 films, I never really watched any of these films before, because at first it didn't seem like my kind of cup of tea or anything, and it didn't seem to interest me that much. It wasn't like I'm a hater or anything of this franchise. It's just, to me, it didn't seem like my kind of cup of tea or anything. But once I heard we were getting a new Purge film, which was this one, I was like, I'll give the series a shot and see what I think of them before seeing this one. So I did watch all 4 films before seeing this one, and so, for my opinions for all 4 of these films are, the first film, it's arguably the worst of the franchise. It's definitely not a great film. But the 2 sequels, Anarchy and Election Year, I thought weren't too bad for films. Those were much improvements over the first one, but they're obviously not great films. And the last film that we did get, which was the first Purge, which is the prequel to the first film, like the original one, wasn't too bad of a prequel, but obviously not a great film or anything though. And so, once this one was about to come out, once the trailers did drop by, I didn't see the trailers first thing when the first dropped by, because I was seeing some of the trailers for other releases that was about to come out last year. And this movie was released back in June of last year in the US, but we didn't get this movie until July of last year in the UK. And this movie came out the exact same day as the new Space Jam movie did in my area. And unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to see this movie on opening day, because unfortunately I was sick and I had COVID, so I had to isolate. But once I was isolating, it did manage to give me some time to watch the original 4 Purge films before seeing this one. And so after that, I managed to get better, and I did manage to basically get a chance to see this one. So I went to see it just a few days after it was first released, because again, I couldn't see it on opening day because I was sick. But after watching this new entry to the Purge franchise, this one, I would say, wasn't too bad, actually. This one was just decent here. Well, despite that this film only has a few problems here, there were some things I did like out of the Forever Purge, like the whole concept idea here for this film I thought was pretty creative enough, where it's basically just a purge where it just lasts forever, where it happens for days and even weeks. I did like that. And I did like some of its aspects of what this one was going for, like for its genre aspect here, where it has action and horror. While this one mostly kind of focuses a lot more action here, where it does tend to have bloody action here, which I kind of found that pretty solidly entertaining here, even though the blood in this film is mostly CGI'd, really, which I kind of found that pretty distracting, really. But for its horror aspect, I kind of found it weak here in this film, where this one does tend to have a few false jump scares here, which most of them weren't even that scary enough. And the movie's paced really well done, since this movie's only now in 43 minutes. It never drags on, and never makes the film really slow paced or even boring whatsoever. I did like that. It never made me like bored to tears while I was watching this film. And even when it gets to its third act, it kind of goes really fast, really, and it just sets off where it's basically about to set up another entry, which, of course, we are going to get another entry to the series. So this one is not the final film, because we are indeed going to get a 6th Purge film. So I'm curious how that one's going to turn out to be when we do get that soon in the future. And as for the characters, the acting's pretty solid. While there's a few acting performances I kind of find over the top here. Some of that character development I just didn't think was that strong enough or even that really well developed here. And for the costumes for the film, where we do see some people who are doing like horrific crimes, I did like the masks and what they were wearing and all that in this film. I did think every single costume design in this film looked pretty nice, and it's a pretty well shot film as well. Because most of this film is not set during nighttime like the other Purge films did. Because this one's tend to go for like a purge where it happens in broad daylight, which I kind of found that pretty creative as well. But in the end, guys, the Forever Purge, like I said, it was a decent entry into the Purge franchise. Again, it's definitely not I wouldn't say it's the worst since the first one. It's just one I wouldn't like remember that much, because there was some stuff I did tend to remember out of, but there's just some moments I don't tend to find that memorable enough here. But there are some stuff to enjoy out here. There is some entertaining action, despite the blood being not real and just mostly CGI'd. And the concept's pretty creative, and it's paced well done and all that. And some acting performances are pretty solid enough. But again, for its horror aspect, it's pretty weak, and there are some characters that weren't even that developed really here. But if you're a fan of this franchise, if you missed a chance to see this in cinemas, it is available to stream on any app of your choice. So that's pretty much all to say about the Forever Purge. I'm going to give the Forever Purge 3 out of 5. Now let's move on to Old, which is a new thriller by M. Night Shyamalan, which of course he wrote, produced, and directed this movie. And this movie is actually based off a graphic novel called Sandcastles, which I didn't even notice that before I saw this movie. But the story for Old is that we follow a couple who, in this movie, they're about to get a divorce. They decide to basically take their children to a family resort area to basically spend a relaxing family vacation together. One last time, since the family's about to be broken up and all that, because again, the couple are getting a divorce. And we also see a bunch of other characters in this movie. They basically book themselves in this family resort area to basically spend a vacation together as well, where includes another family as well as a couple. And they find out that in this area there's a secluded beach in this area, and they decide to basically go into this beach to basically, relax and have fun until later on in this film it becomes a nightmare for these characters, where while on this beach it starts to make everyone age rapidly in this film. Like the children grow older faster, like it makes them go younger to teenagers and then adults themselves, and it's also affecting the adults as well, and a bunch of horrible things start to happen to them. Like one of them gets a tumor, one of them goes blind, and one of them ends up going crazy. So basically in this film we see these characters try to figure out like what's going on and like how is this happening, and hopefully they can basically try and escape the whole beach and just try and fight off this whole situation they're facing. So that's pretty much the story of Old. Now, for this one, I was really looking forward to this one because, again, I'm a fan of M. Night Shyamalan myself. I think he's a nice guy. I do intend to enjoy all of his films, well, most of his films, because there's a few of his movies that do land under my belt, like the ones that are considered not his best ones, which you probably already know which ones are considered his worst he's ever done. But for after those films, which there weren't that received well with both critics and audiences, his career's kind of bounced back into what it was back then with The Sixth Sense. Like after those films, he made The Visit and Split, which I really enjoyed those movies. But when it came to Glass, though, back then when I first saw it in 2019 in cinemas, I thought it was just a decent film. But going back to it after a few rewatches, my opinion has kind of changed for that film. I think that film is just fine. It's definitely not his best and definitely not one of his worst. It was just fine. But however, after that film, when I heard he was making a new film and what kind of film this one is, I was looking forward to it. I was really looking forward to it because of the trailer. Because after I saw the trailers for this one looked really weird but also bizarre. But still, though, I was still looking forward to this one. And for the cast who are in this movie, there's a few recognizable faces in this film. While there's a few I'm not that familiar with, like you've got a few, like I said, a few recognizable ones in this film. Like you've got Alex Wolff, which you may know him from Hereditary. Thomasin McKenzie from Jojo Rabbit, Rufus Sewell, Embath Davidtz, and Gael, García, Bernal, and all that. I'm familiar with those people, but there's a few others I'm not really that familiar with whatsoever. And this movie was released, like I said, back in July of last year around the globe. And I was wondering when I was allowed to see this one, because I was, like I said, excited for this one, but I was still sick because I had COVID. But once my isolation was done and I was cured, I was fully able to go out back to cinemas and see this movie that I was dying to see. And so I went to see this on the 29th of July, and there wasn't that many people in my screening, unfortunately, but there was still a few people in my screening. But after walking out of this one, This one was also just decent here. While there's a few aspects in Old that I did seem to enjoy, like the acting in the film, I thought everyone was pretty solid in the movie for the acting performances, like Thomasin McKenzie, Alex Wolff, Gael, García, Bernal, Embath, Davidtz, and Rufus Sewell. I thought they were all pretty solid in the movie for the acting performances. And when we get to see like the characters in the film age rapidly in the film, they do use effects for those moments, which for those moments I think they were easily the best parts of the film, because you know when we get to see that in this film, it is really weird for like what's going on, and also really bizarre at the same time, which again, those moments were just easily the best parts for this film. Like when we get to see the children age rapidly really fast in the film, from being when we see them young at first, then seeing them as teenagers and then adults later on in this film. And the direction by Shyamalan himself looks pretty nice for this kind of film, because it's mostly because this film is mostly set on like on a hot sunny day on a beach and all that. And while there is a few scenes at night, which those scenes were pretty nice, and they were really nice to look at. Those are the aspects I did like in this film. The weakest aspects I do have with this film is its story, which I kind of found it less structured and kind of puzzling at the same time, because there's some stuff where it doesn't make that much sense, and it's kind of hard for me to understand what's going on, which makes you give you like a massive head scratch, like I did when I was watching this film. And there are some subplots in the film, which to me there's a few that I didn't really understand. Really, for some, it's mostly for like the adult characters, which for those characters in this movie, they do have some subplots, which there are some I did kind of understand, but there's a few I just didn't really understand for like why are they here and like what's going on. And obviously this film is since this is a Shyamalan film, this film does tend to have a twist, which the twist for this film, like at the end of this film, I thought was satisfying. But when this film George would close, I was still kind of puzzled really, and it did make me do a head scratch after I've watched this film, which I wouldn't say the twist is awful. It's not as awful like any of his other films. I do have bad twists. It's just the twist, like I say, it was satisfying, but after watching the whole thing, like I said, I was just left puzzled, just left confused really. And for the writing by Shyamalan himself, it's not great. I wouldn't say it's bad, like The Happening bad. It's just kind of odd, and it's just kind of odd really, because there are some lines of dialogue which do feel a bit awkward and just kind of repetitive really. Like there's one character which he kind of says the exact same thing over and over again in this film. Like he does a movie reference in this film, which I kind of found that a bit odd really. But in the end, guys, Old, it's definitely not M. Night Shyamalan's worst film, I would say. I would definitely say this one's a very divisive film here. Because again, after I finished watching this film, I just saw that critics and audiences were very divisive in this one. But still, though, there are some aspects to enjoy of this film, but there's definitely a few that I can definitely say that people won't really get, really, and it will probably make them a bit, I guess, angry of sorts. But if you're a fan of M. Night Shyamalan, if you're a fan of like M. Night Shyamalan like myself, and if you're a fan of like these kind of films, this one may be a good cup of tea. And if you miss a chance to see this in cinemas, it is available to stream on any app of your choice. So that's pretty much all to say about Old. I'm going to give Old 3 out of 5. Again, I don't think this is another bad Shyamalan film. I think this is a very divisive Shyamalan film, because there is some stuff to really dig out of this movie, but there's some stuff to not really dig out of this whole film. Even though I went with expectations thinking this was going to be another good Shyamalan film, but after watching this whole thing, I just thought this was just a decent Shyamalan film here. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching my double ACAF Road Soul review on both the Forever Purge and Old. And let me know what you think of both of these films. If you have seen these already, if you just recently checked out these films for the first time, did you enjoy them or did you hate them? As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and this has been Foggins Media Corner signing off.